Welcome to the Life You Love podcast.
We're your hosts, Grace Lemire
and Erin Convertini.
This podcast is for the dreamers and the doers.
For the women who want to create a life they genuinely love waking up to.
We believe that life's short, so let's build one we love.
I actually can't believe it's been over 3 years now since Grace and I have dipped our toes into entrepreneurship through side hustles, freelancing, and content creation. And after 3 years, we have learned so much, but also still do not have it all together and still have so many things that we struggle with. So that's what we wanted to talk about in today's episode, some of the most important lessons that we learned and also things we're working on as entrepreneurs in our 20s.
I realized this week that, I graduated college 4 years ago on May 8th in 2021. And so I realized that I just passed 4 years post-grad and I started freelancing right out of college. So it's been about maybe almost 3 years with social media, but 4 years with freelancing. And I was like, first of all, time flies and I feel like I'm getting old, not old, but older, and it's kind of scaring me, right?
But crazy. I didn't think about that because I graduated the same time.
Yeah, I was like, holy crap, that's really scary to think about. Just how fast time has flown by. But I really feel like I have learned so much. It's crazy because I used to fear, this is a side note, I used to fear getting older. And as I was like, wow, like aging, I don't know, really scares me. But I genuinely feel like you gain so much wisdom in every year of life that now whenever I have a birthday, I'm like, wow, I can't wait to see what this next year of my life has and the things I can create with the wisdom that I have. And I think the same applies to business. It's like, sometimes you're going through the trenches, sometimes you're on the highs. It really depends. But I feel like you gain wisdom throughout the whole thing. And I think, okay, if I look back at the last 4 years and everything I was able to create over the last 4 years with the wisdom that I had in each year of my life, and then I compare it to the wisdom that I have in this exact moment, I'm like, whoa, like what can I create in the next 4 years with the wisdom that I have and the wisdom I'm going to gain? And that's a really cool thing to be able to think about.
I have so many like strange thoughts about aging. And they're kind of like contradictory, I feel like, because I just turned 26 last month and I was like, I don't want to turn 26. I want to stay 25. And I felt the same way when I was 24 going into 25, and not because I'm getting old, but because I like being young for the sense of like, I'm accomplished for my age, you know? It's like you're pretty accomplished and you're only 24. Like that's really cool. And then it's kind of like losing its allure as I'm getting older. So that's how I feel about it. But then on the flip side, I look at like when I listen to the Mel Robbins podcast, I'm like, oh my gosh, she's so much older than us. Can you imagine? Like, do you think we're still going to be podcasting when we're Mel Robbins' age?
I hope, guys, because if I'm not employed doing this, I don't know what I'm going to do if I'm not self-employed. We were just talking about this before we came on because, and this kind of goes into the first point that we want to talk about here. I feel like this is true for all jobs, I will say. However, I can't speak on behalf of the 9-to-5ers because I've actually never had a 9-to-5, guys. Isn't that crazy? The only like quote unquote full-time job I ever had was in college. I worked as a teaching assistant at a daycare. So I would work like sometimes 7 to 4 or, 8 to 6, whatever. But I didn't have benefits. I wasn't corporate. I was like singing the ABCs with 2.5-year-olds. Like I wasn't, so it was very different. And it was a seasonal job. So I wasn't there long enough to, I feel like, really experience the woes of being in any sort of job long term. And so my only full-time thing has been entrepreneurship because I started that right out of college. So I can't speak for the 9-to-5ers. I don't want to speak on behalf of them, but I feel like as an entrepreneur, and I assume it's the same in a 9-to-5, there really are just so many highs and lows. And I think that's so normal. And I've had to remind myself and learn that it's normal because, again, we were just talking about this before we came on too. As a content creator and a freelancer, but especially in the content creation realm, I find 1 week I'm like, wow, I'm so good at my job and you can't tell me ish, and I'm going to be so successful and whatever, my content is amazing. And the next week I'm like, I suck at this. Like my content is so bad. Does anybody care? Is anyone watching? Hello, are you there, guys? I'm like, am I going to be unemployed in 2 years? Like it really is like 1 week on, 1 week off, or sometimes you'll get 2 weeks on and 1 week off and you're like, whoa, it really just depends. And I've had to realize, like, take a step back and be like, yeah, I think that's normal, because when you're working 40 plus hours a week on something, it is a lot of your life and you're thinking about it a lot. And if you're doing creative work that feels really personal to you, or you're sharing your life, you're putting a lot of energy and effort into things, and maybe sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think it's super normal to feel like sometimes you're winning and sometimes it feels like you're not winning. And that's, I don't know, it's just part of it.
I do think that it's different than the 9 to 5 space. And I can't obviously speak for everyone, but I think it's different in the sense that I think you care about it more. You know what I mean? Like when you work for a 9 to 5, when you work a 9 to 5, I think you know that you're not a direct beneficiary of the output of your work. But when you're an entrepreneur, you are the one that's directly benefiting from whatever you put out there. So I do think that the highs and lows are correlated to that, but I also think that the highs and lows are weird because they're not completely correlated to how much money you're bringing in. Like
Hmm.
I will have a low week, and like right now Grace and I were just talking about this before we hopped onto the episode. I'm having a low week right now, and it's not correlated to the fact that like no money's coming in this month or whatever. Like it has no correlation to whether this is a high income month or a low income month. But we were just saying before we got on here too, that in relation to the income, some days I'll look at, I like to map out like all of the different ways that I can potentially make money in my business. And like some are higher priorities, some are lower priorities. And I was saying to Grace before we got on here that one week I'll look at that list and be like, oh my gosh, money is infinite. There are a million ways to make money. Money flows to me easily. And the next week I'll look at that list and be like, okay, if one or two of these things go out the window, like I am screwed. And it's so strange because it's all in your head. Like that list looks the same every single week, but it's all in your head. And I do think that that's super normal.
Yeah, I know. I can't, like I said, I can't speak for the 9 to 5ers, but I do feel like when I was working at a daycare, I'm like, okay, yeah, if I go to, I don't know, run an activity with the kids and they don't like it, I'm like, all right, bet, cancel the activity. Next one, here we go, you know? Or like if I like say a joke with a kid and they don't think I'm funny, I'm like, all right, period, next, on we go, you know? And it's also, I'm not doing it on a big stage, right? I feel like with entrepreneurship and content creation, there's usually a lot, especially with content creation, there's a bunch of people watching. And so everything you're doing is like kind of out in the public. So whether you win or lose is public, and that is very nerve wracking. But even on the freelancing side of things, there's just more people involved. It's not just you, especially when you start to grow a business and all of a sudden you have an assistant that you're paying, which is obviously a privilege, and you grow your business to a point where you can then afford to hire someone, but then they're depending on you for their income. And there's just, it's nerve wracking. So it isn't just the volatility of the income. There's a lot of emotional volatility as well, which I will say, I feel like for me, I'm starting to realize my cycle has a lot to do with that. And a lot of times the weeks that I feel like I'm floundering and I'm like, what am I doing? I just don't feel confident in my work, whatever, tends to be around my luteal phase and usually the start of my period, which is crazy because that happens every month, of course. Like I can't stop it, which is so annoying. I'm so jealous of men in their 24-hour hormone cycle. If I had a 24-hour hormone cycle, I would be unstoppable. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no. Like God knew he can't give me a 24-hour hormone cycle
Absolutely not.
because yeah, no, I would be absolutely slaying the house down. But I do find that around my luteal phase, I start to question everything. And that's something that I'm trying to be more aware of because I think as a female business owner, I have a friend of mine, I'm not going to say like who it is, but we've had conversations before where she's like, I just want to burn it all to the ground. I just want to shut everything down and burn it to the ground. And sometimes I'm like, in my luteal phase, I'm like, I'm going to burn it to the ground. I'm canceling everything. I'm going getting a full-time job. And then it's ovulation. And I'm like, I love being a business owner. So I feel like I need to not make decisions during the luteal phase.
I completely just shut down in general. Like, I don't want to think about it at all. You want to know what I did in my luteal phase this month? This is really embarrassing. I watched an entire season of Love Island. And for anyone who has never watched a season of Love Island, the Australia seasons are like 24. This one was 24 episodes long, an hour each episode. That was in 1 week, 24 hours that I spent watching.
You know what? I don't blame you, girl. I don't blame
That was
you.
me and my luteal, and I was literally sitting there with like a blanket over my head, like with a pit of anxiousness, being like, "What the heck am I doing?" Like, yeah. So that's definitely how it is for me too. I find it really helpful for me when I'm feeling that way because I think a big reason why I have the highs and lows is because I don't know my path forward, and I start taking action toward one path, and then I'm like, well, that shouldn't be a priority, this should be a priority. So then I start taking action toward that path, and then I'm not actually like physically making any progress because I'm taking like one step forward toward thing A, and then one step forward toward thing B, and then kind of like backpedaling and going against, and I just don't know where my priorities are. So I find it really helpful to just like get everything out of my head and write things down on paper and be like, okay, what's the root cause of the reason why I'm feeling this way? Keep asking myself why until I get to that root cause. So that kind of helps me get myself out of my head and be like, what am I even trying to accomplish here? What direction am I going toward? And yeah, how can we actually make substantial progress towards something?
Yeah. I think having people too well, first of all, I guess I'm a big supporter of therapy. I feel like I talk about therapy a decent bit. I've been going to therapy for almost 2 years at this point. I've gone to therapy for longer, but I've had the same therapist for the last 2 years, and she is amazing and has genuinely changed my life. And I look forward to those sessions where I can just brain dump to her and she helps me untangle my thoughts. And journaling every day is really helpful as well. But I also think being in community with people who are doing similar things to you, like my entrepreneur friends are my lifelines. And I love that, I can be their lifeline too when you're having those moments where it's like, we were talking about this before we hopped on too. For context, I had like a month where a bunch of brand deals like ended up getting pushed, and so they didn't get paid out, and they're getting paid out this month. But when you do like 8 brand deals and then none of them get paid out that month, and you're like, and all of a sudden like that income's not coming in until the next month, you can look at the facts and be like, oh yeah, I'm good, because I can see that they're all pending and they're all getting paid out this month. But when you look at the numbers from your prior month when they didn't get paid out, it's very spooky and it's very threatening to your sense of security in your finances or your business or whatever, just because the income is volatile. And so having entrepreneur friends that I can be like, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And they're like, girl, come back down to earth. Like, look at how much you have pending and the dates that it's hitting, and you're fine. I think that's helpful. I think we're in a society right now where there's so much information everywhere. And I feel like you can consume all that information, then just sit in your thoughts. But I think having the kind of like accountability and community with other people is what a lot of us need. I think that helps us kind of get out of our heads and move forward.
Totally. And the therapy is, I've never seen a therapist actually ever, which is like a little bit crazy. But I know I told my content coach, which like can kind of be considered like a business mentor. I told her the last time we met, I was like, I feel like this is a therapy session, which I know for a fact therapy would be cheaper than a business mentor. So maybe I should try that, because I definitely feel like some nervous system regulation is needed over here. But that brings us to our second point, because you mentioned like as an entrepreneur, community is so important. And our second point here is that entrepreneurship isn't an identity. And this is something that we were talking about in another one of our podcast episodes. I can't remember exactly which one, but we were kind of just talking about the idea of, instead of kind of pigeonholing yourself into one thing, really taking the identity of an entrepreneur. And what I mean by that is, you don't know exactly what your career, what your income streams are going to look like 5 to 10 years from now. You don't even really know what they're going to look like next year. But when you have this identity of an entrepreneur, you trust yourself to continue to learn and try new things and pivot, which is really important. I was on a business retreat last month in Costa Rica, and I was talking to the host of the retreat about this, and I was saying, sometimes I get really down on myself that content creation is such a big portion of my income, because content creators get a bad rep, and like, do I have a strong mission, and what's my purpose, and all of that. And she was the one that told me this. She was like, Erin, you don't have to identify with being a content creator. You don't have to identify with being a freelancer. You don't have to identify with being a podcaster. You are an entrepreneur, and an entrepreneur goes where the opportunities are. And what's an opportunity today might not be the same opportunity that is 5 to 10 years from now. So that was a really good lesson, and something that I try to keep in mind. Like, I don't need to have it all figured out. 5 to 10 years from now, I'm not going to be doing the exact same thing. Will I still be posting content? I don't even know. Will we still be podcasting? Hopefully, that's why we started it. But you don't have to know. But when you're identifying as an entrepreneur, you trust yourself to pivot when necessary.
Yeah. I think I have a few thoughts here. One, entrepreneurship, and again, I don't mean this as a comparison against a 9 to 5, because I've never been there, so I can't speak to it. But entrepreneurship just takes a level of grit. I feel like that's difficult to explain, that when things aren't working out, you do have to pivot very quickly and just make decisions and go where the opportunities are and try to and go to where what excites you too. But one thing that's interesting is with my freelance business, I've worked with entrepreneurs at all different stages. I remember early on I had a client who he was like in his early 30s. I think he was a millionaire. He's definitely a net worth millionaire. But he might have been a multimillionaire at that point. I don't know his exact net worth. But I remember like kind of like interacting with him and realizing that he had founded another startup and he really didn't have it all figured out. He still struggled with self-doubt, he struggled with anxiety, and the co-founder of the company did too. And I think she was also a net worth millionaire. Or I know she was a net worth millionaire, but again, potential multimillionaire. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm like, wow, in my head, I really put these people on a pedestal thinking that and I mean, I have tons of respect for them. It's not like they're not on a pedestal, but I assumed they had it all figured out. I assumed they never struggled with self-doubt. I assumed they always like knew what the right next step was. And come to find out when I talk to them, I'm like, they don't. I have clients I've worked with since then that are the same way. They've founded these companies that, were backed by some of the top investors in the world, made these crazy exits where they sold their companies for millions of dollars, and they founded new companies. And these new companies come up and they have the same dang challenges. They're like, I don't really know what I'm doing here, or wow, like this did not pan out the way that I thought, or we got scarily low to being, not profitable or whatever, scarily close. Like, and so I thought, wow, okay, here I am thinking these people have it figured out because they have some skin in the game. They've been doing this for a while. They've had prior success, but we really are all just figuring it out. And that's normal. It's difficult, but it's normal. And I think as an entrepreneur, you just have to commit to that. And that, I will say, is one of the most challenging things for me. I don't like when things are unknown. I don't like when things feel just like, yeah, like there's just you have to create the path and go on it at the same time. You're like actively walking down the path, and each step paves the path a little bit more. There's no path set for you that you can just walk down. It's uncomfortable.
Yes. And I've also worked with companies of different sizes. And I agree. I think everyone's faking it until they make it. But I also think that your success is directly correlated with the success that you portray yourself, your company, to the world to be, if that makes sense. Like if you portray yourself as how do I want to explain this? If you want to brand yourself as a content creator, then you're a content creator. If you brand yourself as a business owner, then you're a business owner. If we brand this podcast as a podcast, then it's a podcast. But if we brand this as a media company, then it's a media company. It's all the same thing, but it's how we're branding ourselves. So I think that's super important to remember as well, for better or for worse. But then I think on the flip side of this, I was giving advice to one of my business mentors, actually. I was giving him advice because he was asking me about like growing on social media, because that's something that he's not super comfortable with and all of that. And I was saying that it's important to remember that you have unlimited tries to succeed. And I was talking about it in the sense of growing on social media, but I think this applies to entrepreneurship in general. You literally have unlimited tries to do anything you want in life. And I think that was the biggest kind of mindset shift that I had to make, because again, like you don't like feeling like you're failing, you don't like feeling like you don't have it all figured out, you don't like putting work out into the world and it flopping, but it's going to flop until it doesn't. And if you don't stay on the path and just like quit the path and try something else every time something doesn't work, you're literally never going to get anywhere.
I had this realization a few weeks ago when I was doing the 6-week life reset on my social media. And there was a point where I kind of wanted to stop. Like I wanted to give up. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to document this anymore. Like this is a lot of content, and like, are people even caring or whatever? And some videos were hitting and some videos weren't. I was like, I don't know. And then I thought to myself, I was like, how do you know the plan doesn't work if you've never fully followed it? You know what I mean? And I started to think about how with like freelance clients, I'll be like, okay, we're going to do social media management. You need to give it at least 90 days because we got to post consistently enough, da, da, da. And there'd be clients in the past who would stop before that mark. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course it didn't work because we're 4 videos in. What do you mean? And I would think about how irritating it was when I would create this plan for them that I'm like, I know this works. You just have to follow it, and they wouldn't. And I started to be like, well, I need to be just as disgusted with myself when I don't follow the plan. But I think when it comes to the unlimited tries, I think sometimes there's like a path to get where we want to go. And sometimes there's parameters around how much you can try. Like if you're, for example, like, okay, I'm gonna make certain investments in my business. All right, well, okay, eventually you're gonna run out of money. So we got to think about those tries. And of course, you only have a certain number until you hit 0. But in the whole like grand scheme of life, you have unlimited tries. You can just keep showing up in different ways. And I think sometimes that forces you to try in different ways than you would expect. Like maybe the way that you're trying to go about it is not the way that's actually going to get you to where you want to be. And so you need to fail a few times to be like, okay, maybe the way that I'm going about this is really, maybe I need to try something different and be okay with that. And I love the analogy too. Not an analogy. I don't metaphor. What is it? Accurate statement? I don't know what it is. Quote. I don't know what the word is. I've got like 3 remaining brain cells today, guys. Okay, work with me. But it's basically this idea of if you knew that what you wanted was 30 failures away, you'd be like, all right, let me get out there and fail. You'd be just doing things that you knew probably would fail so often because you're like, I'm only 30 fails away. And so if you look at it that way, like with content, let's say you want to be a content creator as well. Go out there and post 30 videos. And if they flop, great, amazing. Guess what? Don't feel bad because nobody saw them anyways if they didn't get views. But also, like, now you know what does and doesn't work. Now you have some data. You're putting in some reps. I'm sure your content will be better at that point, and you're one step closer to a video that's going to hit. So think of it that way. If you know there's a certain number of failures, act as if there's 30 failures till you hit what you want. And I'm sure something will take off before you get there.
100%. I love the idea of setting parameters around how many times you are going to take action on something before you decide that it's not going to work out. Which, sidebar, if you didn't listen to last week or maybe the following week's episode on taking action, we gave you 3 strategies to start taking more action to get everything you want. I love that episode. It was so good. But that kind of brings us to our next point, which is that you have to start before you feel ready. And on the side of setting these parameters for yourself. So let's use content creation as an example. When I started posting on social media, I gave myself those parameters and I said, okay, for 60 days straight, I'm going to post 3 videos a day. And like, those were the parameters that I set. And that was me saying, this is the plan. And this is what I'm telling myself I'm going to stick to. And at the end, I can analyze that data and say, this is how much time I put into that. This is the result that I got. And do I think it's worth my time to continue pursuing this? So setting those parameters is good because by the end of those 60 days, I was like, okay, I did grow a decent amount. I am starting to monetize. I really enjoy this. So I'm going to keep going. But if I would have stopped after the first week, I probably wouldn't have kept going because I didn't give myself enough time. So you have to start before you feel ready. And that is the next point that we want to get to. Just because you're never going to be good at something from the beginning, and you're never going to get to the point of being good if you don't get started. And I was thinking about this the other day, how, because we are 4 years out of college now, which is a little bit crazy. I think as we get older, our acceptance for starting something new and kind of accepting that we're not going to be good at it from the beginning goes significantly down. I remember when I was in college, I had like 4 or 5 internships in college. I was just like really hell-bent on getting a bunch of internships and figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. And I obviously wasn't good at any of those jobs right when I got the internship and I started, right? But like, that was the attitude that you go into it with. But then when you graduate and you like get a job and you start a career, I think that part of your brain kind of gets turned off and you're like, okay, now I'm only going to do something if I'm going to be good at it. But I feel like we could kind of like take that into the rest of our life and just have this mindset of we're going to try new things even though we're not going to be good at them from the beginning.
Okay. Two things. One, quick note back on what you were saying about the parameters around trying. Create that parameter for yourself. Try for that period of time. And if at the end you don't have results or you don't like it, that does not mean give up. That does not mean I am not going to do that. It means pivot. For example, doing the 12-week year, part of my morning routine for this quarter is meditating. I'm learning that I don't really love meditating and I want to replace it with something else. I'm not looking forward to meditating. That does not mean that I give up on the whole morning routine. It means that when this time frame is up that I've committed to, I pivot it, or I could change it beforehand because it's been, like 6 or 8 weeks of not liking meditating. It's helpful. And I think I should still do it because I feel like it's probably beneficial for me. I just don't really enjoy it. But that's not to say give up. It's just to pivot what you're doing. So I wanted to add that really quick because I don't want people to think, oh, I'm just going to try for 6 weeks and then when it doesn't work, I'm going to stop. No, keep going. Just pivot what you're doing. Try something different. But I think when your point about when we get into adulthood and we are kind of afraid to not be good at something. It's funny when I worked with kids, you start to see it in some kids where they care about what everybody thinks about them. And as early as 2.5, like I would see it in the kids that I worked with, or they care about how good they are at something, or, whether they understand something the first time, or if they could do something as well as the other kids or whatever, when it comes to sports and activities and stuff like that. But you also see kids try random things a lot more. And I think being in school is a big part of that because it's a learning environment. And so you're showing up to class on day one and nobody knows geometry because this is the first geometry class you've taken, or, and I think it's somewhat normal. We're in a lot more scenarios where we're new to things and growth is part of that. But I completely agree that when we get, especially post-grad specifically, there's an expectation or a feeling that we have to be good at everything. And I think that's something that as a society, we've just gotten wrong. We've gotten into this habit of thinking that we are not ready for something unless we're not scared, or we're only ready for something when we're good at it or when we're confident at our ability with it. That's so far from the truth. Like that first, I made a video about this the other day. You're going to be cringy the first time you do something. Why do we think that we're not going to be? Go back. We've said this multiple times. Go back and look at our old podcast episodes or our really old social media content. Just don't tell us that you did it. I don't want to know. Okay.
Yeah, don't tell us.
Don't
please.
tell me. You can tell me, just don't send me the video. You can be like, hey, watch your old content and it gave me the boost I needed. I'm going to be like, period. Don't send me the video. I don't want to see it either. But you're going to be cringy because you don't know how to do it. Do you think that people who are at the top were successful from day one? No. Go look at I'm sure Mel Robbins, if you scroll way back on her stuff, Jay Shetty, like all these podcasters, whatever, go look at their stuff. I'm sure their old stuff was not that good. And if it is good from the jump, it's usually because it's some innate ability that they're just they're a natural born speaker or coach or whatever it is, or they have that experience in another way. They've been making a ton of presentations or something at work. And so now when they go to record themselves talking on a podcast, it makes a lot of sense. It's really easy for them. We have got to get out of the mindset though, that you're going to be amazing at something when you start, especially entrepreneurship, because the tasks of your job and what you're working on changes. And there's going to be things that come up that you just don't know the answer to. I talked about this in my stories a few weeks ago. Whatever it is, I don't know what it is. I can't seem to get my bookkeeping down. I keep making mistakes on it. I don't know what is going on. I don't know if it's the software that I use or whatever, but I keep categorizing things incorrectly and my accountant keeps having to help me. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And so we literally had a call to be like, here's how we need to categorize these things. And then he was like, let me just go through your books, correct everything. And then you'll take it back over on this month and you'll go from there. Amazing. Why would he said to me at one point, he was like, Greg, I said to him, I'm like, am I an idiot? I was like, why can't I do this? I don't understand why I keep messing this up. And he was like, you keep messing it up. He said, because there were certain transactions I was miscategorizing. He said, I had to go to college to learn how to do things like this and it was something with my payroll or my benefits or something that I messed up in how it was set up. He was like, that's why you're probably not doing a great job at it, because it's literally new to you. And he was like, the software's not super intuitive. There's a million different transactions to categorize. And the way that it basically adds transactions a couple of times and you have to categorize them a certain way so they zero out. Nasty. Bookkeeping is nasty. I hate it. But it's just one of those things where he was like, I have a degree for this. So yeah, why would I expect myself to be good at that type of thing? Why would I expect myself to know how to do taxes? I'm not an accountant. I don't know that. That's why I hire someone who knows how to do it. Why would I expect to be good at editing a YouTube video if it's the first time I've ever edited a YouTube video? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. No
Yeah,
sense.
I think we have this idea as a society that you graduate from high school, you go to college, you decide what you want your major to be, and then that major is going to help you decide what you want your first job to be. And then that first job is going to take you through your entire career. You're going to work in that field or in adjacent fields forever for the rest of your career. And I feel like that, like you said, does do such a disservice because it doesn't leave a ton of room to continue to learn and continue to pivot, whether you want to get into something entrepreneurial or whether you just want to do something else. Like that feeling of cringe can come from not even putting yourself out there in the entrepreneurial sense, but let's say you want to change career paths and maybe you have to go back to college to take a couple of extra classes in something to be able to be qualified to do something else. People can still feel cringe for that. And it can feel kind of embarrassing to admit that you're maybe like taking a step back to take a step forward or pivoting, or you feel like you failed because what you wanted to go to originally didn't end up panning out. And that all feels cringy or embarrassing, but it shouldn't. You should be in this like mindset that you are continuing to learn and you can pivot at any time and try something new. I love the phrase cringe is a side effect of future success. Grace and I have worked with a content coach that says that all the time. And I think it applies to whatever you're trying to do. Don't feel cringy for it. And I think the cringe comes from anything you do, you feel like you have to do in public because we live in an age where the internet is a thing. And even if you're just switching career paths, you're going to have to update your LinkedIn and you're going to have to say that you went back to school to take a couple of classes or whatever it may be. But that cringe is just showing that you are learning and growing. And if you're in the right circle, you'll be around people who are also learning and growing.
Two things. One, I will also say, even people who aren't in your immediate circle, 9 times out of 10, they do not care at all. At all. I remember on some of my really old content when I first started creating that is arguably cringy in comparison to where I'm at now. There were people that I went to school with in middle school and high school that would comment on my posts and be like, oh my gosh, I love this, Grace. Like, I remember someone texted me I went to college with and I hadn't talked to her in years. And she was like, you are such a light for Gen Z. Like, I love this. Like, this, makes so much sense for you and your personality. Da, da. I'm like, wow, okay. What the, like, and here I am worried about what people will think. So many people support you way more than you think. I also think too, going back to the topic of this section of like, you have to start before you feel ready. I think I heard this the other day and I've heard it multiple times, but it was such a good reminder in preparation for this episode. You have to stop being afraid of what happens if you do it and start being afraid of what happens if you don't. So instead of if I go after this or if I post that video, I'm going to look so cringy, or if I go back to school, people are going to think I'm a failure or whatever, and be afraid of what happens if you don't. If I don't post this video, I'm never going to know what it's like to be a content creator. I'm never going to be able to go after my dream of being a content creator. If I don't face my fear and just go back to and do those classes, I'm never going to have the career that I dream of, or I'm never going to have it could be whatever thing you're trying to call into your life. What happens if you don't go after it? And ask yourself, what are the consequences of staying right where I am and not taking action? I know that always like lights a fire under my butt where I'm like, what am I missing out on by not going after it? And make an exhaustive long list, because there will be a lot of things that you're missing out on by not taking action because you don't feel ready.
100%. The point about people in your immediate circle not caring about what you're doing, that brings us to our next point, which is that other people's opinions on how you make money literally does not matter. I cannot stress this one enough. And this is something that I get in my head about all the time. And it's something that I constantly have to remind myself. It doesn't matter. For example, I saw this video on TikTok yesterday where this girl was talking about how she thought she wanted to do something entrepreneurial. I know she said it in the video, but I can't remember. And she was saying she knew she wanted to do it, but her corporate job was not giving her enough time to do it. So she quit her corporate job. She started, it was either waitressing or bartending, one of the two. And she was like, I literally make more money waitressing or bartending than I did in my corporate job. And it freed up my entire day to work on what I actually want to do. However, I think a lot of people are afraid to make choices like that because society has a certain kind of like standard for what's a respected career path or respected path that you choose to go down. So people are afraid to make those decisions, but it literally doesn't matter how you pay your bills. Whatever can get you ahead financially is the path that makes the most sense for you, and it literally does not matter to other people.
I know there's this guy, I think his name is Oliver. I just came across his content like a day ago. His Instagram is something, it's like Sailing with Phoenix, which is his cat. And everyone's been talking about him on the internet because he just like skyrocketed up to 1 million followers. And he basically liquidated his 1K, bought like, or he might have already had a sailboat, maybe he bought it. And now he's sailing from, I think, Oregon it is, to Hawaii. And he's doing it because he has I think, don't quote me on or don't come for me if this is the wrong term, but I think it's called a degenerative spine disorder. So he is at risk of potentially ending up paralyzed later in life. And he was like, you know what? I was working a job that I hated. So I quit my job and I went after the thing that I wanted to do. And I think obviously it's a somewhat extreme case of liquidating your 401k and sailing a boat across the ocean. And he had previously only sailed in a lake, I think he said, or a river. So big thing. But I think it's funny because when you look at the comments on the videos, everyone is supporting him. Everyone's like, hell yeah, go after what you want, do your thing. I haven't seen any comments. I'm sure they're there in some form, but I haven't personally seen any comments on the videos of people judging him or being like, this is a horrible idea. You're a low life for doing that. You know what I mean? No one's saying that stuff. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. It's your life that you have to live. Are you going to be okay with that life at the end of the day? There is this book. Sorry, I just thought of this. I think it's called 30 Lessons for Living, I believe is the title. I think I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but I read it back in 2023. And then I've read it a second time since then. And it's basically, they interviewed like 1,000 or something elderly people and asked for their life advice. And it's basically a book about what their regrets are by the time they reach like being, in their, 70s and 80s and stuff. And it's very, very fascinating. And caring what people think, I believe, is like one of the sections. And so when it comes to, how you're making money and what you're doing, if you need a nudge, I would definitely read that book because it's very inspiring to hear it from people who are further in life.
Yeah, go after what you want, but then also feel empowered to run the numbers and do what makes the most sense for you. For example, I saw this TikTok a couple years ago and I have not been able to get it out of my head since. The person was saying, let's say you graduate from high school and you go to college because that's what society tells you to do. And for the next 4 years, you take out $25,000 a year in college debt. So you graduate at 22 with $100K in debt versus graduating at the age of 18, going into a trade or starting to babysit full time or become a nanny or do whatever, waitress, bartend, whatever it may be, just starting to work at the age of 18. And you're still living at home, so your expenses are super low. And from the ages of 18 to 22, instead of putting yourself into $25,000 a year of debt, you are investing $25,000 a year. So instead of being 100K in debt at 22, you have 100K in the stock market at 22. And it ran the numbers of how much money you could have like by retirement or in 10 years or whatever it may be. And it was like that 100K could turn into $2.2 million by retirement or something crazy like that, just by not following the traditional path and doing what makes sense for you. So if you're listening to this and you want to be the girl that quits her corporate job to start waitressing to be able to start her business during the day, do whatever makes sense for you. You are a smart person. If you're listening to this podcast, I know you're ambitious. So run the numbers and whatever makes the most sense, go for it. It doesn't matter what society says is the most respected way to live your life.
I also think too, in this, like, there's a stat, I think it says by 2035, over half of the job, half of the talent in the job marketplace or whatever is going to be independent workers. And so I think we're getting into, and I don't know if that's still accurate to this day with all of like advancements with AI and things like that, but I think we're starting to get to a point in society where we are accepting different jobs, and the idea of someone's income being made up of multiple income streams is becoming increasingly common and accepted by people. And I also think people really enjoy, how do I say this? I think because for generations prior to ours, there's been a lot of get a job, stay there forever, you know, work there for like working somewhere for 40 years was like the ultimate, like, wow, like you are so successful, you know? And I think now it's getting to a point where we're getting away from that. And I think people love hearing about the novelty of when someone is doing something unique. You know, every time I tell people what I do, people are really fascinated with it. Even if they don't understand, they're like, "Ooh, that's really cool." Or I'll talk about, I've mentioned on the podcast multiple times, the woman who was on an interview on the Mind Your Business podcast, I think is what it's called, and she made money selling a course on horses, right? I don't know anything about horses. I don't care about a horse course, right? But that was such a fascinating thing for me to learn about because I'm like, wow, look at this woman out here doing the dang thing, doing something so unique. Far more people actually are interested when someone is doing something outside the norm than hateful, right? So if it fulfills you and you like it and you're like, yeah, I've run the numbers and actually I would make more or I'd make just as much or I might make less doing something else, but I like it more. I'm happier. Okay, cool. Go and do it. And I guarantee you, when you tell people that you're stepping outside the norm and doing something a little different, far more people are going to support you than you think.
100%. I was just writing an email this morning about side hustles, and I found this study that said 43% of side hustler as in you have a couple different streams of income, but nothing is quote unquote full time, like you're not W-2 at any company. 43% of those people make more and work fewer hours than someone that is just working one full-time job. And I think that that can be a little bit tricky because I know for me, when I worked my corporate job, I was in audit, accounting, basically. I was in audit, and my identity was kind of wrapped up in my corporate job. Like, it's very easy when someone asks you what you do to be like, oh, I work in audit at a big Fortune 50 company. I would like list the name and everyone would know the name, right? Like that becomes your identity, and that just becomes a very like safeguarded way to describe yourself. But when you no longer have that and you're going to say, oh, okay, well, I waitress a couple nights a week and I have X, Y, and Z side hustles, and nothing becomes your identity because nothing is your main thing. I do think that that becomes challenging for people, and that's just kind of like a mental hurdle that you need to get over, because again, other people's opinions on how you make money literally don't matter. But let's move on to the next one because we have two left and we're running out of time. The next one is, if you want to increase your income, you have two options. And the reason why we're talking about this is because I feel like when we have the conversation around increasing your income, entrepreneurship, the question that naturally everyone goes to is, okay, well, how do I increase my income? So we broke this down into two options. The first one is trading your time for money. And the second one is building something that can eventually let you stop trading your time for money. So the first one can be a little bit more of an immediate stream of income. Think a side hustle, a part-time job, freelancing. And then the second one will be a lot of upfront work for no money, but then eventually that money can be more exponential because you're no longer trading your time for money. So this will be more like building a business, a startup, becoming a content creator, things like that. So we wanted to kind of break down those options, and they're both amazing options. The first one can fund the second option. I feel like that's really important to remember. Like if you start a side hustle and you make some money from it, but then you eventually want to start a business, that side hustle can free up some time for you to work on your business and things like that. But we just wanted to kind of break those two out so that you have a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about when we're saying increasing your income.
I think also too, the way I have always thought about these two like options is time in versus money out and the ratio between those, because I think a lot of times with a 9 to 5 we think of hourly, so it's okay, $35 per hour or 40 per hour or whatever, and then I think about income where the time in versus money out ratio is exponentially higher. And for example, when I started freelancing, I did all hourly work, so it was like $20 an hour, which after taxes is like, what is that, like $14 an hour? Like and in Massachusetts, that is not enough to live. But it was $20 an hour. So every hour I invested, I got $20. And then you start to get better at something. You increase your hourly rate a little bit, but you're still ultimately charging or trading time for money. So then I thought, okay, well, if I package this as a retainer, I'll charge them the same amount of money, but it actually doesn't take me that much time to get all these tasks done. And that's when you start to crack the code of, okay, the time in versus money out ratio is significantly higher. It's why I don't do any hourly work anymore, because it doesn't make sense. I know I can put in, what is it? Maybe for 16 hours a month and get paid $3,500 from a client. And it's not hourly. So if I have a week where it takes me a little bit less time, great. I'm still getting paid the same amount despite putting in less time. And I think then there's that other kind of option where you're eventually then creating something that's profiting for you in the background without you really putting any more time in. And I think that's one of the reasons I feel like we built a podcast is like, we're putting it, guys, we don't make money on this. I think we made like $1,200 in all of last year. And then pretty much all of it's going to go to taxes, like, which we didn't really think about. Paying an accountant to file the dang taxes. So we basically took an L, but it's something that for us is like a long-term play. It's like, okay, well, we'll build this up, and then, you know, hopefully eventually we'll get to a point where we're monetized on Spotify. And now this bank of episodes that we've been putting out there, people go back and they listen to, and we're making money from it. And people want to add, you know, ads into some of these episodes and things like that. And then it becomes something bigger there, you know, and there's a community around it, and maybe there's products eventually and things like that, where the time we're putting in that initial upfront time investment for revenue down the line.
Yeah, the podcast is a good example, but this example definitely transcends to whatever you're trying to do. But the time in versus money out is such a good way to think about it, because 3 years from now, realistically, we're probably going to be spending less time on the podcast just because we're going to be better at it. So how long it takes us to outline episodes and edit episodes and post, like, we'll have our systems down for all of that. So we'll probably spend less time with the podcast, but we can make more. So whatever you're trying to do, like, the longer you're doing it, the spread between how much time you're putting in and how much money is coming out can get greater and greater. And then the last one is a good one to kind of wrap it up, because I feel like I always catch myself thinking about this, which is that entrepreneurship and self-employment is not about doing whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it. I feel like there is a little bit of kind of a glorified thought around what it looks like to be self-employed. It's like, oh, you're self-employed, like, good for you. You get to do whatever you want. It's like, yeah, I mean, I could, but I'd probably make no money.
Yeah.
You do have to have that level of self-discipline. And yes, technically I could sleep in tomorrow and just lay in bed all day and not do anything, and that would be totally fine. But you have to have the self-discipline to not do that, because if you are doing that, then the money's not going to keep coming in and you're not going to make progress toward what you're trying to get at.
I think it's funny because I hear sometimes people compare being an entrepreneur and getting to do whatever you want, whenever you want to do it, with when you're in a 9-to-5 and your boss assigns you something that you're like, this isn't really within my scope. And I think it's very fair when you have a 9-to-5 and like you're hired for marketing, and especially because you're getting paid hourly, you shouldn't be taking on things that are outside your scope. I think it's very fair to push back on that. But it's funny because I'm like, guys, the same thing happens in entrepreneurship. Like, I'm like, when there's something that goes on with like accounting, like an issue there, I have to do it, or I hire someone to do it. And I'm not getting paid to do my own accounting, you know, or to do my bookkeeping or whatever. Yeah, when there's just every single task, like, I'm the CEO, technically, legally, but I'm also the COO, I'm the CMO, I'm the CTO, the CFO. I'm all of the things because it's a company of one. And the things that I don't want to do that are outside my ideal scope, if you will, I still have to do them. Yeah, not being like, I feel like you end up, yes, there's like a breed of entrepreneur that, you know, they wake up whenever they want, they work a couple hours of the day, and that's that. And that's great, right? I know somebody who that's pretty much, they do like high ticket consulting. And so I'm like, that's amazing for you. Their day consists of like taking one call and getting a haircut. And I'm like, amazing. I love this for you, right? That's not the reality for the vast majority of entrepreneurs. A lot of times you are still working a normal schedule, a normal 9-to-5, like hours of the day. Do you have more flexibility than a 9-to-5? Yes, absolutely. I think in a lot of cases you do, but you still have to do things you don't want to do. Sometimes you're doing them at times you don't want to do them, ways that you're like, I just really hate doing this. Because it's not, it still has to be done. It's a business. It's still got to get done.
Yes, it definitely helped me to start thinking of myself as the whole C-suite of my business as well, because I used to think if I wasn't executing, like as a content creator, if I wasn't filming a video or editing a video or posting a video, I'm not being productive. but that's not true. There are so many things about running a business, regardless of what you're trying to do. You do have to do the accounting. You do have to make sure your taxes are under control. There are a lot of things. If you have team members, you have to spend a lot of time training and delegating to team members.
Overseeing
Yeah, overseeing.
emails, like,
Yes, there are
yes.
so many different things that you have to do, and all of that is quote unquote productive if you learn how to delegate your time appropriately. But I also think it's about learning to balance knowing when you need a break, but then also being disciplined enough to do the things that you don't want to do. Because if I took a break every time I just didn't want to do something and called it like, oh, I need a break, I'm feeling overwhelmed, like I would never get anything done because I'm always feeling overwhelmed. But you do have to know, like, okay, when do I actually need a break? And when do I need to, okay, on a Saturday, I usually do try to do at least like 1 or 2 hours of work on like a Saturday or a Sunday or whatever, because I like to spread things out over 7 days. That's just my preferred work schedule. But when do I actually need a day where I physically do not pull up social media, don't pull up my computer, don't check my email, any of that? Because there are some days when I physically need that. So it's all about learning how to balance. But with that, I think that brings us to the end of this episode. This was a super fun one, and I was really excited to film it because I know that we've been going through a lot and we have been struggling with some things. So let us know what else you want to know about entrepreneurship. We love filming these episodes. You guys seem to love these episodes too. Every time we post anything around entrepreneurship, increasing your income, content creation, you guys seem to love it. So definitely let us know in Spotify what else you want to hear. You can also DM us on Instagram at The Life You Love Pod. We love hearing from you guys, but thanks for tuning into the podcast, and until next week.